Good evening. Welcome to Stories Rock. Things that go bump in the night and other tales that terrify us. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Leah Ruckberg, I'm a producer of Stories Rock, and I'm also your host this evening. I want to thank my husband David for being our videographer. And if you would like to see this show, it will be up on YouTube, and if you want to see any of our past shows, you can also go back and take a look at some of those. Mary Brzustowicz writes about growing up in a large family and other domestic disasters in her blog, Keep Mary Out of the Kitchen. She grew up spending summers in Maine with her 7 siblings in an old house with endless projects and surprises. A little known fact about Mary: Mary can make a grilled cheese sandwich with an iron. She calls it dorm cooking. That's why we keep her out of the kitchen. She'll read The Old Blodget Place.
How's that? Good. Challenge. Hi.
Hi.
We had this summer farmhouse on the coast of Maine. It was one big building with a barn attached to the house by a breezeway. It was set back in a big field on a slight hill. The barn door was carved with the names and the dates of people who had lived in the house. Most were from the early to mid 1800s. The names and the dates got less frequent as you got into the 1900s. The house came completely furnished. Not only furnished, but with pictures on the walls, beds made, musty sheets, and thin wool blankets over blue and white straw mattresses. And the linen closet was full of crazy quilts and feather pillows. Sure, it was odd, but there were so many of us, 7 of the 8 children, my mother, my dad stayed here in Rochester to work, and Millie, the attack poodle. There was so much going on, and I was way too little, maybe 5 years old, to be worried about odd when we moved in. Then the odds started to overlap the busyness. First it was the looks we'd get when we told people where we lived. Big house in the middle of the field, Old Blodget Place, that's the one. No one in their right mind lived there. Weird house. My mother would laugh. It suits us fine. But she would have us girls rotate down to sleep with her in her big bed until my father came to visit. Whichever daughter had been left alone in her room would seek out a sister, so no one was unaccompanied. Sometimes, when Mama hadn't been able to get one of us to bunk down with her, she would creep up the steep front stairs, slide into my bed, and conk out, her arms stretched over me like a protective shield. Because at night, things did happen in the house. Not big things. Sometimes just footsteps when everyone was in their beds. Sometimes the creaking of an empty rocking chair. And sometimes there were voices in the kitchen. Not our voices, but gruff and deeply accented fisherman voices. Sometimes they argued, and sometimes they just seemed to be exchanging information. All we knew is that we didn't want to go in the kitchen. Our poodle, who was known for her ferocity, would raise her head, growl low, and set her head on her paws as she kept the pace of the conversation. We would sleep knowing that Millie would let us know if anyone was coming. And she did. She'd stand in an empty doorway and bristle. Yes, poodles can bristle. She'd growl and show her teeth, and she'd keep us small children away from an area until, like a cloud moving away from the sun, she'd lick her chops, walk away from the door, and let us pass. There were nights when I slept downstairs with Mama, and I'd wake up to find Millie standing on her hind legs, her front paws on the windowsill, looking at the cellarway door. We had replaced the old wooden cellar door with a red slanted metal one. It could only be opened from inside the house, and the dirt cellar could only be accessed through the kitchen. The outside cellar door was closed most of the time. The night when the dog let us know the cellarway door was open, my mother would say, "Get up and shut the door, would you?" This terrifying task meant I had to get up from a warm bed, go through the living room with long, dark windows, go into the kitchen, where we sometimes heard the ghostly voices, open the cellar door, and go down wooden steps, avoiding the fourth step that had a knothole that if you stepped on it the wrong way, would give you a wicked splinter. And then you had to step onto the damp earth floor, breathing all the time, worried about stepping on worms, panicking over what might be down there, comforted by the gray poodle snout that poked into the darkness behind me. I'd race up the wooden steps that led to the outside and turn the lock so I could pull the door down and slip the lever back into a locked position. I'd run my hand over the lock twice to make sure it was locked so I wouldn't have to make the trip again. Because there were nights that I would scramble back into bed and my mother would throw her exhausted arm over me and say, "Thanks." My heartbeat would return to normal and would sleep. And then I would wake up and the dog would be looking out the window at the open cellarway. The excursion down to the dirt floor basement would be repeated. The dash back to the warm bed. Mama would mutter her thanks. Sleep would fall back over, and then, woof, Millie would be back at the window a third time, and sometimes even a fourth time. And the cellarway door would be open and laughing. Now, you might think that there was monkey business and shenanigans going on in our house. There was, but not at that hour, and not at the summer house. My older sisters were gorgeous, and the boys in town and from a few towns over used to come and visit, but none would come in the house. They'd sit on the front patio that Mama had made us build and they'd visit there. Our house was spooked, and so were the boys. We made deals with the ghost. We're fine with you. We just don't ever want to see you. So we'd feel the presence and sometimes hear it. And sometimes we were very grateful for the help it offered. See, we had to open the windows every morning, and each window had a flat piece of wood to hold it up. A healthy house must breathe, Mama would scold, if we forgot to open our windows, especially the boys' room. If we were out and about, which we usually were in the afternoons, and it started to rain, we'd come home, and the windows would be shut, and the flat piece of wood would be neatly on top of each window. "Thank you, Flossie," we would say, because you see, two of my older sisters had named the ghost Flossie Wallace. They had found an old photograph in the bedroom closet and decided that she looked like a Flossie, and so we thanked Flossie for her help and asked her to stay invisible to us. And she did. But she also let us know when she was annoyed. There was the August morning my mother wondered out loud if she should sell the place. My older siblings had aged out of coming up to Maine in the summer, and there was just my sister and our young nephew and me making the trip. Mama only said it once, because a few minutes after she said it, there was a full and awful scream from the barn. My little nephew came barreling around the corner of the barn, his dark brown eyes skittering in fear. My sister blew in from the backyard clothesline. I crashed down the stairs. Mama stood on the front patio with Dexter, our new and much less savvy poodle, crouched by her side. Mama's tan face was white. "Was that any of you screaming in the barn?" "No, no, no." "I'll get the car keys and we'll go for a drive. Flossie, settle down. We'll be back." We shut the doors to the house and the barn, and we walked over the lawn yellowed and crisp from the summer heat. We got in the car and we drove, shaky at first, then full of the buoyancy survivors have. Let's not talk about selling while we're here, Mama suggested. We all thought that was a great idea.